Hello, everybody, and welcome to the HuntScience podcast. I'm your host, Eric Lance, a professionally certified wildlife biologist and natural resource professional, college professor, and owner of Land Source Consulting. The HuntScience podcast is dedicated to bring you the latest information on popular habitat management topics, wildlife science, hunting strategies, and the general conservation and land management practices to help preserve our natural resources. Thank you for joining us today. We are excited to have you with us and hope that you enjoy today's episode. With that said, let's get started. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the HuntScience podcast. I'm your host, Eric Lance, welcoming those who are new to the show and thanking everybody for tuning in once again. On today's episode, we have a local trapper named Glenn Witchey. Glenn is based out of here in Northeast Ohio, someone that I have heard, his name spoken many times when trapping comes up. And, I wanted to get him on the show. One of the old school trappers that you can learn a lot from. We talk a lot in this episode, obviously, about trapping and, Glenn's background and what are his preferences and just a good general discussion around the topic of trapping. We go down a lot of different rabbit holes, no pun intended, on this episode. And it was an enjoyable time sitting down with him and picking his brain and getting some insight to what trapping was like back in the early days, and then kind of how it's progressed. I think anybody who has any interest in trapping and maybe trying to get into it, this episode is definitely going to be something that you're going to enjoy. And Glenn's going to be on again. We're going to do a lot more content with Glenn, especially with him being a local guy, doing some video tutorials and things like that, but also some more interviews and really digging into some specifics. But I wanted to get him on here and have a general welcome and just a general conversation, as this was the first time I was meeting him in person. But anyway, with that, let's get this episode started. I want to welcome everybody once again and thank everybody once again for checking us out. And welcome to the HuntScience podcast. Let's get going with Glenn Witchey. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the HuntScience podcast. Today, I am here with Glenn. Glenn is a local trapper in the area here, and as you guys know, podcast is going to be an episode dealing with trapping. As a biologist, and as a deer guy and habitat guy, predator management is definitely an important aspect of anything, and anybody who's been, involved in deer management and things like that, they understand that. But there's a lot of misconceptions out there. We're not going to get into obviously a whole lot of, predator specific science today. But I wanted to get someone on. It was important to me to get someone on that has a background in trapping, because I've dabbled with it a little bit. By no way, shape, or form am I a trapper. I know the terminology when I'm listening to things, and I've seen a lot of old time trappers too. And in researching some people, your name had come up, and honestly, it's been a while since I remember who actually told me about you, but I just remember finding you and I had you on a list because you were local, and I went to your Facebook page and there was just photos you had just slaughtered. You got on there, man. I was like, okay, there's photos that just lined up pelts, and I'm like, all right, yeah, this guy knows what he's talking about. The proof is in the pudding, right there. So
I guess I'm one of those old time trappers now.
Hey, man, like me and you were talking on the phone. It's a dying breed. I hear a lot of people that say, "Oh yeah, I'm a trapper," or I've trapped. I was like, "Well, okay, yeah, I've trapped too, and I'm not a trapper." I couldn't really tell you the first thing. I've made a lot of mistakes. I think I've only caught. I think I've only gotten 2 coyotes on a foothold, and I've set out dozens, and we're going to get into it.
You've done more than most people have done.
Yeah. And honestly, and my wife will tell you, I have a very addictive personality, so I get it very interested and intrigued in a lot of hobbies. And not that, trapping is a hobby, but for me as a wildlife biologist, I'm like, hey man, it would be, beneficial for me to learn how to trap, at least to kind of help, the things that I'm doing or whatever. So, I just thought I'd get into it and try it, and got on YouTube and started, watching videos on how to prepare traps and which ones to buy. And, at the time I didn't really know too much about anything. So I was going to like Minnesota Brand, those guys, and talking to them like, hey, what damn traps do I buy? Cause I don't know. But anyway, so, we'll get onto this. So why don't you go ahead, Glenn, and introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from.
Okay, I'm Glenn Witchey. I grew up in Norton, Ohio. Live in Akron now, south part of it, Portage Lakes area. Grew up in a rural community. It was basically farms all around me. My grandpa farmed, and my whole family hunted. Not so much trap, but hunted. But I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and we had an old chicken house. I went to clean it out. I was going to make it a clubhouse for me. And in there was a pile of traps hanging up. Not many, maybe a dozen. Number 1 Long Springs mainly. And I was just overtaken by these things. I couldn't set them. I wasn't strong enough to set them. So the first trapping season, and my dad wasn't the trapper, but he would set those traps for me, and I would carry them to where I was going to set them, praying that they didn't go off. And it just kind of went for that. That was prior to the fur boom of the 70s. That would have been late 60s. So, and a kid that old, I would catch a couple muskrats and I'd get 50 cents a piece. Yeah. That wasn't bad.
Which was probably good money. Yeah.
Back then, that wasn't bad. And like I say, I came up through the fur boom. I went from that to getting $7.50 for a muskrat, and that was $1975, so that wasn't bad for a kid back then.
Yeah.
And $75 for a red fox, I'd love to get that today.
Oh, it's yeah, and yeah, we'll get into that too. But the fur boom, I mean, what caused it back then? I mean, was there a specific
fashion?
Reason? Just fashion was the big thing.
Yeah. I mean, it was all fashion.
Beaver gloves and stuff like that.
It was long-haired mostly, fox, coyotes. It was all just hot. Women wore that.
Yeah.
Europe was full of it. New York City. I mean, New York City was the hot spot for fur.
Sure. Hot spot for fashion.
Yes,
things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And still is somewhat, fur rich up in that area. It comes a lot smaller, but
I can probably guarantee not today.
It is
really
still
I
a lot of
in
fur.
Today's society.
They go up there. They go up there and lock trucks and kind of hide it, but it's still going through New York.
I figure you'd be drugged through the street if you had something like that on in today's society, man. Someone would be.
Well,
offended.
it's not necessarily on the street, but the fur is going there and getting tanned. And
what's it like? I mean, is it even? What are the prices like now for
They
pelts?
are very, very low.
Very low.
Especially with this thing we got going on with Russia. Russia and China was big importers of our fur, the biggest. And right now
I'm assuming it still has to be, stretched and everything tanned and,
yes.
and on a board. And
there used to be a fur buyer on, every town had 2 or 3 fur buyers. That's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
So it's pretty much got to be set up. I work as an auctioneer part-time.
Okay.
And I just did the fur auction for the state of Ohio in Kidron last weekend, actually. And it was not what it should have been. But
yeah, there's a guy in town here actually that has there's a flea market type place in town here. There's a guy there. I've yet to see the guy, but he's got a bunch of pelts hanging up. He's got bobcat and fox and things like that. And they're still pretty pricey.
Oh yeah.
But it's like, man, I just no one's gonna pay for that.
They sell them.
Yeah, I mean, in this area,
people buy them for wall hangers.
Yeah, well, and that's one of those things too. I mean, something like that, you're probably better off, I would imagine, like eBay or something like that. But I don't know. We'll get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious, like the fur boom. Like you look back then. I figured it was fashion related. But yeah, so what got you like into the trapping? Was it just like the one time and then you were hooked after that, or?
Yeah, like I say, when I was a kid, I found those traps. I just couldn't shake it. I couldn't even tell you why. I just couldn't shake it.
That seems to be a common thing with people. What I have talked with some old timers, that were trappers and things like grad school and things like that. It's a recurring thing, as people are just like, man, I just love doing it. It's just something like you said, can't shake it. It's something I want to do. I love to do it. And you're like, yeah, man, just some people have it, some people don't.
Something else, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but there's a lot of people that are a deer hunter and they hunt 4 days a year.
Yeah.
To be a well-rounded outdoorsman, you need to be outdoors. And if you're a trapper, you're going to be out there all season long. And more than that, you're going to be out there all year long.
Yeah, I don't know if you watch Ranella on the Meat Eater. Steve Ranella, he's a pretty popular, outdoorsman, professional hunter, has, podcasts, and he's got a show on Netflix called Meat Eater, and
I haven't seen it.
He's really good, but he advocates, for that kind of stuff too. Is not only, hunting as a way of life, but he does a lot of trapping. He grew up doing some trapping and stuff like that, and it's the same thing because, trapping really forces you to understand the ecology of the animals that you're going after, and especially if you're looking at coyote populations and you're looking at trapping coyotes. Well, one of their many food sources is deer fawns, right? So you need to also know where the deer are, because where the deer are, the coyotes are going to be.
Right.
Where the rabbits are, the coyotes are going to be. You got to kind of placate to that. And you're right, that does make, and that's another reason why I kind of wanted to get into trapping too, because I would see tracks out there and I would see the scat out there. And, I'm like, okay, why am I seeing it here and not in other areas, things like that. And I just didn't know enough about it, until I started talking to some other trappers, and just started saying, okay, if I see these types of areas, I gotta really watch out for coyote sign before we start maybe putting in, focusing on some bedding areas, for deer or, upland game birds, doing some management for habitat work there. You don't want to do that around a predator, hot zone. So just kind of being able to read the signs with that. But anyway, so you got into it as a young kid, growing up on a farm, and you're still active?
I am still active as much as an old man can be. Yeah. I've trapped, I actually trapped a bear in Maine, but I've trapped from Maine. I've trapped Pennsylvania, Ohio, of course, North Carolina, Mississippi, Alabama, trapped, my mind went blank, New Orleans.
That's still a good list.
Louisiana. Louisiana this year.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you went this year?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. So do you do anything with the state, or is it all private landowner stuff?
All private landowner.
Yeah. Because I know the state of Ohio, I've been contacted a couple of times, and I don't understand why I've been contacted. But the Division of Wildlife will request the assistance of trappers for like gray fox and stuff like that, because they want a TMR, they want to trap, mark and release, with radio collars and be able to see where they're going. And I'm like, I'm not the guy. I'm like, I don't understand where you got my name from, but it is. I'll come down, but you probably aren't going to catch a gray fox. I'll tell you that. We'll probably get a skunk. We'll probably get a raccoon. Like, I don't know enough about it. But anyway, yeah, I know a lot of state agencies, because they don't have the manpower, and most of the people on the staff don't have the trapping experience. No. So when trappers travel a lot, I always wonder, and I always ask, like, how much you doing with the state versus private landowner, farm owners that their livestock's getting nuked, or some type of negative human wildlife interaction with those species. So
I actually, when I go out of state, 95% of the time it's for deer management.
Somebody, okay. Yeah, people reach out to you saying, "Hey, coyotes need controlled."
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I was a state nuisance trapper for 20 years. I let it go now because I don't want to crawl in attics anymore.
Yeah. I went through that training too. There was a time when I started my consulting business, my wildlife business, as I was, around the time I was getting into trapping. And I said, I'm going to go through this. So I went through and did the training for it. But I started thinking about it, man. And when I got a lot of calls, for that. And I could only imagine, what real trappers go and get as far as calls. But I just started looking at it, man. And I was like, I'm not good enough to do this. Like, I don't know enough about it. And then I started thinking about it too, as a wildlife biologist. I mean, one of the things, like, I'm not keen on the idea of killing a raccoon just because you can't close your damn trash lid. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, type of thing. So I started doing it more to the effect of doing more consulting, be like, hey, let's talk about, as a biologist, I can tell you why, you're having this problem, and things like that. But, I'd get calls like, I got a bat stuck in my house. Yeah, well, good luck. Here's another number to call. Like, I ain't dealing with it, So, yeah, that was one of those things. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to go be a nuisance trapper. And I was like, that was a terrible idea. But, yeah, I could only imagine the stories, from that, because I've heard some good ones from some
I got
other
a couple
people.
Good ones, but I don't want to say them now.
Yeah. So, moving in, so if I remember right, did you have any involvement with the Ohio Trappers Association?
I'm a member. I'm a life member of the Ohio Trappers Association.
How has that changed? Because I sit here and think, if someone like myself, I'm 38, not old, but I'm definitely not young, for sure. I don't feel like it sometimes. But, I sit there and look at it. And one of the things with this podcast is I want to, again, you and I talked about, is kind of, invigorating the thought of getting into trapping, or people. I'm sure there are people that are listening to this and they're like, hey, it sounds interesting, because, like me, I get on YouTube and I watch these guys that are younger guys in their, mid to late 30s, late 40s, and, down in Alabama and these southeastern, states of the country. And, they're running trap lines or setting traps out, man. They've got a group of guys together, and it's almost like the camaraderie of a deer camp. You know what I mean? They're down there. They're down there getting everything ready. So I see that, and I'm like, yeah, man, I get it. Like, I can understand the intrigue with that. So
one thing when you're on YouTube, though,
well,
remember, anybody can put something on YouTube, and there's just as much bad information on YouTube as there is good information.
But I think you can. I'm drawing a blank on some of the names now. I think if you got a good head on your shoulders at all, I think you can kind of probably tell.
Yeah.
The good from the bad. With results and stuff. There's one guy used to be from a show called The Management Advantage, and I forget the guy's name, but they have a really good. They're a bunch of biologists as well, and they were probably my favorite ones to go on there and get some information on, because I just sit there like someone like myself. There's not a whole lot of resources, to where other than YouTube, but the first thing that comes to mind is organizations. So the Ohio Trappers Association, I don't know anything about it. So what kind of resources are there for people listening to this that are in Ohio?
Fantastic if you got any interest at all. I haven't been a member but I went around the Ohio Trappers Association probably since I was 12. At that time, the information wasn't freely given out like it is now. If you want to be a fox trapper, you had to earn it on your own. Probably nobody is going to show you much about it. I had a cousin who was a very good fox trapper, and I was trying to learn, and I can still remember this. I took a dead chicken and stuck it in a hollow tree, and he was going to come out. And I said, hey, this is my fox set. He goes, yeah, that's pretty good. And that's all he told me. Well, that was a terrible fox set, but I didn't know it.
Looking back on it now, that's horrible.
Yeah, well, why did I even do that? But today, everybody's willing to help you. Everybody. Yeah. I mean, there's demos all day long at a trapper's meet, and you can go to any trapper down there and ask a question, and they're going to help you. I mean, it's just...
Yeah, you start seeing that with a lot of things. I remember, I was just fishing today, actually, and I went down. I had some time to kill, and I was like, I'm gonna go and wade in the river and catch some fish. I did pretty good yesterday. Caught a decent amount of perch and actually a couple walleye. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go back down again today. But you go down there and guys were there today. There was no one there yesterday, and just everyone's talking. You're like, I was at West Branch. I did this. I was at Mosquito. Did this. Like, even 5-10 years ago, man, or even before, like social media, really, obviously social media's been around longer than that, but it just seems like, there is more information willing to be out to give out, even with deer hunting, things like that. Before you found a good deer stand, you're like shit, man, I ain't telling anybody.
I ain't telling nobody.
Good luck, Yeah, you're looking for deer, not my problem. Same thing. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time, and it's a good time because like we were talking. I do teach at a university, so these are the things I like to talk to the students about, because the courses that I teach conservation, I teach wildlife resources and things like that, and the students that I get through there, they're not all going to medical school. I get students that they don't know what they want to do. They want to go work for a state agency, and when I was going through undergrad, these weren't topics that were really taught. God, undergrad for me was, 15 years ago, somewhere around there. And it's like, you didn't hear about this stuff, even in the quote unquote conservation classes. It was a professor that, had the closest relative experience in anything remotely conservation, but they weren't a wildlife biologist. They weren't, actively manipulating and managing habitats. They don't have experience trapping. They don't have experience doing this. And it's the natural resource field is hurt. I'm sure people probably argue with this, but it's hurting a little bit because you don't get people that come out with the interest in this type of stuff. And you start talking about the heritage, right? The hunting heritage as a deer hunter, the fishing heritage as a fisherman, the trapping heritage as a trapper. These things, we don't want to die. And it's such a valuable part of this nation's history as outdoorsmen.
Oh, 100%.
That, it's something that needs to be preserved and brought out into the public more and get misconceptions put away. So let's kind of start now and take this podcast, at least for a little bit here, on the new trapper. Okay, so if what type of traps are there, and what are the ones that getting into this?
I'm probably not a good person to ask that. Because I don't know if you know this, but I am co-owner of Wolf Creek Products.
I do know this, which is why I asked.
So I make traps.
Yeah.
I think that's the only thing you should buy.
I do know this, yeah. But, it's honestly, because I've got, I think 3 dozen foothold traps. I don't know why I bought that many, but my wife got mad at me, and I bought 3 of them, 3 dozen of them. I'm like, well, I gotta put like a dozen on this property, right? Like, I didn't know. I've got some footholds. I've got some, I got different types of traps, but I didn't know what the hell I was buying. I'm like, hey man, this is in the trapping aisle. That looks good. Let's grab this and that. So, kind of start off and describe, let's focus on, there's a lot of species that we can trap. This podcast, a lot of people are probably interested in, the mesocarnivore, realm, the coyotes and the fox, bobcats, and we'll start there, with those 4-legged people.
Not people, but as a trapper to begin with, we are hated by a lot of people. You've got Humane Society of the United States.
A lot of people.
You got PETA. You got
so are deer hunters. So are hunters.
Yeah, but you probably trappers more. And as soon as you say trap, the general public, you're hurting animals. If you size that trap right, and I should have brought one. I usually bring a trap that I stick my fingers in. When
we do a video, for those listen, we'll do some content for the Patreon page, and that's something that. But anyway, keep going.
But it is very important to size your trap to the species you're after. Now, are you going to catch something else? Yeah, you probably will. But you still, the biggest part of your check, and you don't want to hurt that animal. Yeah. You want to hold it there until you get there. That's all you want to do. And if you've got the right size trap, that animal's going to be coiled up and sleeping when you get there. That's all it's going to be.
Yeah, the two that I got, they were like that. Well, I take that back. The first one of them was. The other one wasn't too happy.
Well, now if they see you coming,
that was the thing. That one actually, it was wide open. Like I was driving down the path,
and
they saw me coming.
And then it wants to get away from
exactly.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. So the foothold. So there's the foothold traps, which is I think what a lot of people are probably used to seeing. They have the pan on it with the dog latch and kind of the jaws that come up. So those are good. Now as far as coyotes and fox size-wise, what are you looking at for size-wise?
If we only had fox here, I would use a 1.5, but we don't even have many fox anymore. So with a coyote, I like a number 2.
Yep.
In Ohio now, you can use a number 3. To me, it's a little bit on the big side for a coyote. So I would just recommend a number 2. Yeah. That way, if you catch a fox, it's not overkill either.
So that's a good, interesting question. So have you done anything really north of Ohio, trapping wise?
Maine.
Well, yeah, Maine. So I was thinking more kind of like Michigan, like you start getting into, well, just in general, really where you've trapped. What are you seeing typically size-wise with coyotes? Because now, you start to hear literature, you hear, people talk about these interbreedings with domesticated dogs and, the whole coy wolf thing.
Yeah.
I mean, are you seeing, that stuff aside, what are you seeing as far as size?
I don't care if it's a coon, a possum, a deer. I don't care. The southern stuff is smaller.
Yeah.
Well, the farther north you get, it gets
same
bigger.
Thing with deer.
Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. You're a biologist. You probably know that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably big body masses help you through the cold weather. Probably. I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting science there, especially the white-tailed deer. I mean, the bigger deer, the more northern you go, the bigger they are. But
I know they've taken big deer from north and taken them to Alabama.
They get small,
and in 3 generations, they're back to their size.
It's always interesting. Like when I travel and do like these continuing education. Seminars and things like that, or everyone's swapping, deer pictures and stuff. And I'll show a picture of a buck I killed a few years ago. That is a good buck, but it was it wasn't the biggest buck. You showed it to someone from like Alabama, and they're like, "Oh yeah. My Lord,
yeah,
like what is that?" I'm like, you're sitting there looking at it like that wasn't. You should. I'll show them friends of mine that have killed some monsters, and then they can't even believe it. They're like, "That's Photoshopped." Like, no, it's not Photoshopped. But anyway, yeah, it's so the trap size. So that's always good because that was one thing I struggled with. I was telling you when I bought mine, I'm like, I don't even. Like, I look at it, I'm like, that looks like it'll fit, but I'm like, that one looks too big. And then I find out that one's the size I need to have. So I think that's something confusing too, because not everyone's going to, even knows who to call. Right. They're going to go to Cabela's. They're going to go to the local, outdoor shop, and there's a trapping aisle, and you're just relying on what the store owner buys, and hopefully that they're buying. Hey, my clientele that are trappers are mostly going after coyotes. I'm going to stock nothing but coyote size, foothold traps.
Yeah. Usually not the case.
Yeah, usually not the case. What are the leg traps for coons? The little tubular ones. What are those called?
Those are dog-proof traps.
Dog-proof. That's right. I was drawing a blank on that.
They're a great tool if you're a coon trapper.
Yeah, I've used those more.
They make you a lazy trapper, to be honest with you.
They do work very well. Even for someone like me who sucks at it, I've been able to nab quite a few coons with those things.
And you can preset those, pre-bait them, so opening day you're just punching in traps and
going down.
Yeah.
What do you do as far as, so for the new trapper, I know one of the big things with your trap preparation is kind of the modifications, like putting laminations and stuff on. For the new trapper out there, what do you recommend going down the rabbit hole and buying traps, doing the thing? Like what would you do to a trap, or what would you recommend for someone who's new?
Ohio's changed some of our laws so that you have to almost modify your traps a little bit. Now, most game wardens don't know those changes, so they're probably not going to measure your traps. Yeah. But really, according to the law, you've got to do some stuff.
In terms of what are they requiring?
Jaw thicknesses, number of swiveling.
Lamination. Are they requiring laminations on there?
Well, they're not requiring laminations, but they're requiring, I think it's a 5/16 jaw thickness.
Okay. For those of you listening too, sorry, if you're not familiar, a lamination is like a little small diameter tube that usually gets tack welded on top of the middle part of the jaw and the top part of it. It just increases the surface area and the gripping area that trap's going to have, in holding that ammo. So anybody, obviously, listen to this or even watching, right now, we don't have one right here, but that's, you look that up, you'll be able to see it. But anyway, so there's that modification. Now, what as far as, like rust proofing, and I know there's people that dye them and dip them and things like that.
I used to do all that. And they've got some of these cold dips now. They work pretty good. I don't dye anymore. They used to use logwood dye. We can't get it anymore. They still call it that, but it's closed dye. And it does have an odor on it. So if you're going to dye, I let my traps air out 2 weeks after I dye them before I wax them. But like I said, I don't even dye them anymore. I clean them off and I wax them, and that's it.
Kind of like the rustic look, just hanging on the wall, rusted, weathered and used, and you're like, you look at that trap.
And a rusty trap blends in good.
Yeah, especially in an ag field and things like that. Yeah. But so that was one thing that I went down. Man, like my wife was so mad at me. Like I bought those traps, and like them damn things ain't even been in the ground yet. And I'm out there, I'm doing all this stuff to them. I'm watching these shows. I'm like, this trapper's got this, and these did this, and my dad owns a weld shop, here in town.
Oh,
like
you can do whatever you want.
Well, not they don't weld there. It's a supply, kind of like a privately owned, air gas type thing, But working there, as a kid and stuff like that, I learned how to, weld just because I wanted to just understand it, But I remember going down there. I'm like, I'm gonna do this, and I went down the deep end. You look at my traps, you're like, oh man, you've been trapping for a while. I'm like, nope. Like just went off there. Everyone else was doing it, and just figured I'd do it. So because that's one thing, when I do talk with people, they just have no idea where to start, and obviously the first thing is traps. Like you got to figure out.
Well, the first thing they should do is probably go to a state meet.
Yeah.
So try to meet somebody in their area that is a trapper that'll take them under the wing.
So while you're talking here, I'm gonna pull up on my handy dandy laptop right here that I never really used during the show. But the Ohio Trappers Association, is it just Ohio Trappers?
Ohio State Trappers.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so it's ohiostatetrapper.org. For anybody listening right now, go over there and look at it. And I need to look into that too, because this is something that I've been more interested in getting back into, because I do have, some property now and things like that where I could, get out there and see what's going on and just like I said, man, get an understanding for what just going down that, no pun intended, rabbit hole.
And we have some regional meets, that's okay. Good. They're not very big. This year in Ohio, we're having the National Trappers Meet, which there's going to be
I see that.
trappers from all over the United States, Canada.
So that's July 28th through the 30th, and that's going to be in Lima, Ohio. So Lima is in Northwest Ohio. So, not
what a fantastic show.
Yeah, I'm going to have to check that one out, actually, because it's just one of those things. I mean, even I'm speaking from myself here, is I'm a new trapper, and like we were talking on the phone. It's like, I got a bunch of questions because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening to this that are going to be in the same boat. And there's probably going to be a lot of people listening to go, yeah, I've been trapping my whole life, and that guy I don't know. It just, it is what it is. Listen, man, there's 6 ways, half dozen other, how to think. If you get coyotes in your trap,
you're doing good.
You're doing good.
You got to be happy with yourself. Yeah. That's all that matters.
So continuing on, putting the trapper's kit together, if you will. So we've got our traps, or we've got our foothold traps. I would, tell me if I'm wrong, I would also recommend maybe getting some of those dog-proof traps because they're not expensive. And traps in themselves really aren't that expensive.
No, they're not.
Now, if you start buying, it's like duck decoys, man. They're not expensive by themselves. If you start buying 6 dozen of them, anything, quantity. So, that was one of the things too, is those dog-proof traps, I think, are really, really good. And they're easy to learn, easy to set, from things that I've done. And I've had pretty good success with those with raccoons. So we've got our traps set up. Now, what type of, I know we can go down the rabbit hole with this probably. So now you have your trap. What about anything to consider as far as the anchors, the chains? Is there a certain length? You like to run a swivel, no swivel, 2 swivels? So
in Ohio, you have to have 3 swiveling points.
Okay, see, I didn't, yeah.
So, which is not hard to do. Actually, if you got one at the trap and you put an inline swivel, you got 3 swivels.
And actually, now you said that, mine do have. I remember someone telling me that because I remember having to put them on. And anyway, my chain was a little long after it was all said and done. I probably made it way too long.
Yeah.
But, when we do the video, I'll bring mine out. You can tell me how bad I did.
So, as far as anchoring, when I was a kid, I did a lot of drags, which I wired or fence stapled it to a long wooden pole, and that worked. Then I got into rebar, especially during the fox years, which you made a 18-inch rebar stake, welded a nut on the end of it, and that was your stake.
Really?
Now, and I use wolf fang anchors because that's what I make.
Yeah.
and we've got to sell 15 and 18 inches. I've never been anywhere that I've thought you needed an 18-inch cable.
I think mine are close to that. So when you say anchors, you're talking about the earth anchors that you drive into the ground?
Yes.
Yeah, with a stake. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was one of the things that I really liked too, because I've seen some other ways people were doing with like the rebar and stuff like that. And those earth anchors, to me, like there's nothing showing at that set.
Well, it's not only that. If you're carrying a dozen rebar anchors,
heavy.
You got to weight. If a dozen earth anchors don't weigh a pound.
Yeah, exactly. So we've got our anchor. So, for the checklist, you got to get our traps, obviously, buying some anchors, from a trapping supply like what you have, buying those anchors. Now, like for your traps, do they come preset with all that stuff? Can people request that? And
they're so easy to put on. Yeah. And if we do one with a camera, I'll show up, but they're so easy to put on that really no need for that.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the fun, for me, is sitting in the garage at the table or whatever with a bunch of traps and like, okay, I've got 3 dozen of these earth anchors here, and I'm going to put these on, and I'm going to do some welding on here. Like just getting that stuff, to me, that's fun, and I think that's I think that's just an intriguing part. You look at deer hunters. Some people probably don't like it, but hanging tree stands is fun.
Yeah.
Going out there and checking the straps and getting up there and making modifications of this
lanes or whatever.
Yeah, that's the part of it. I've Dr. Harper is someone I bring up all the time, and I've heard this before, too. But like your management is not a single event; it should be a way of life. Mm-hmm. Whether that's deer management, whether that's trapping. So this kind of stuff should be something that you enjoy doing. Like I enjoy. I only recently started duck hunting, but I enjoy going out there and setting up those duck decoys, getting them rigged up. I enjoy getting a deer stand and making modifications to it, setting it up how I want. I enjoy setting a blind. I enjoy setting a trail camera. I enjoyed, making my traps and things like that. So that was something that, people I think can relate to, as far as that goes.
I do want to hit on one thing, though, since you asked me that, about how to prepare your traps. Most of the time when I go out of state, I'm testing some kind of a trap that I've made, and I will take them boxes, go to the car wash, spray them off, throw some anchors in, and I'm on my way.
Just
I don't
right.
do anything. I set traps.
Yeah.
And the old timers their minds would have
Lost
blown up
their
if
mind.
you, but you catch stuff.
Yeah, I think a large part of that, again, I have no scientific evidence to back this up, is complete hypothesis. But I look at how the variability in a coyote's home range and how adaptable they are. I don't. I think something like that makes sense when I hear that, because I think they're just so used to different smells and things like that that it doesn't freak them out as much as it did 50 years ago. When
They smell that stuff in the field all the time.
Exactly.
And I don't care what you do. You are not going to make that coyote think that you weren't there. He's going to know you were there.
Yeah.
You've got skin follicles falling off you all the time.
Yeah.
He's going to know you were there.
Yeah, I've got bird dogs, and it's just the sheer difference in their sense of smell.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And even with deer, I've gone out there without scent proofing myself, and I've killed plenty of deer.
Yeah.
Like, they're so used to, my main hunting property is out at my parents' house, and they're just so used to my dad out there doing yard work, and the wind picks up and it smells my dad. They're so used to hearing the lawnmower. They're so used to hearing, the crunching of leaves, of something walking in the woods. I mean, you go out to another good friends of mine house. He has a big agriculture field with a gun range. I mean, there's been countless times we're out there shooting like high caliber guns, and there's deer just out there, foraging on the vegetation or browsing, and they could not care less. They've become so habituated to a lot of things. Obviously you want to practice good scent discipline and things like that if you can, but it's not the end of the world. Like you said, I mean, the proof is there. You experience those things, and that's
our week of gun season. How many deer are gutted in the woods in Ohio? And them coyotes are right on them gut piles, and they are smothering in human scent.
It's the same thing with deer when they hear a chainsaw fire up. You put a trail camera up, and you will see pretty quickly, depending on what you're cutting, like a maple or something like that that'll sprout or stump sprout and things like that. They will be there.
Yeah.
After when that thing starts, they're looking. To see that they hear that anyway, that's a whole different story too. But yeah, it's very true. So okay, so we got the trap set up now. I'm just visualizing walking down the trapping aisle. I was just at Cabela's a couple days ago, and I stopped in there after I talked to you, and I was like, I need to kind of look and see what's out there before I go. So now, obviously, like the hammer and stuff like that, if you're using an earth anchor, you need to drive those things in, so you're going to have a good hammer. Talk about the bait. That's the next thing.
Well, bait, there's tons of different bait out there.
Glenn's 101. What are we dealing with here?
I don't buy bait anymore. I make my own bait.
Your own. That's why I was getting to, because most people, they're going to make their own.
I make my own bait. I make my own lure. I used to sell it. I don't anymore. I give some to my friends. And there's some secrets to it. I'm not going to give that away.
Don't blame me.
You can keep it pretty simple.
We'll talk after.
I mean, seriously, if you catch a muskrat and take a quarter of that leg and put it down a dirt hole set, it's an excellent bait. And if it starts a little bit of rot, it's even better. Yeah. But there's, I believe, I've never had the guts to do this, but I believe it would work. I think if you dug a dirt hole and put a trap there, you could catch a coyote. Nothing in it. I think they smell that dirt. If you've ever seen deer, you clear a little patch of ground out back, and your next day there's going to be deer tracks all over it.
Yeah, seeing what's there. I just had a train of thought. As far as the bait goes, that's where we're talking too. It comes down to understanding the ecology of what your target species is. Whether you're deer hunting, you need to understand how a deer interacts with its environment. If you're going after trapping, coyotes or fox or whatever, you need to understand their ecological role in the environment, what their food sources are, because that's going to help. Obviously, if you want to make your own bait, like you said, you take a rabbit leg and put it down there, like
that's bait.
That's bait.
Yeah.
What about setting up too? And this is something I played around with to no success. But like pheasant feathers and things like that. And even I seen people too, like will put CDs. Like old
CDs are okay. Don't use pheasant feathers. You're not allowed to use live animal stuff in Ohio.
Yeah.
Some states you can, not in Ohio.
They
and that stuff is mostly for bobcats.
Is it?
Yeah. coyotes are actually, as people think, oh, they go out and kill all this stuff, and they do. They're scared. I mean, they're afraid. If you go to your set, if you make a set and you go the next day and you got a pile of dung and some tracks there and they're like 3 foot from it, that coyote's scared. He doesn't know what's there. He's like, what is that? I don't know. He'll be back. You can guarantee he'll be back, but he's just scared. It's just like a coon. You could set a leg hold trap on top of the ground. A coon will barrel through it. They don't care. A coyote doesn't know that's a trap. It doesn't know what it is, so it's scared, and that's why you're not going to catch it in that.
Yeah, I put trail cameras in all my sets, and it's interesting. I did get some videos where I'm like, I screwed something up because that thing knew something was up.
Yeah.
It felt something. Like I could see it the way its body position was. Like it felt something, and I had a little marker on the ground. I think it was a rock or something I put down just to kind of, when I'm looking at the video, I know where the trap is in relation to where I'm looking. And I remember, something I did, and it, never came back, on one, came back on a couple. The same thing. Like it never even got close to the trap because it's like something is going on. I'm like, I don't know.
And it doesn't understand it.
Yeah, and I didn't understand what was going on either. I'm like, hey, this is what the guy does on YouTube, so it should work, right?
I do have a series of videos. They're on my website.
There you go. Yeah.
That's called Teachers of the Night.
Okay.
And for an average guy, it's going to be the most boring thing in the world. But somebody that really wants to learn how an animal approaches a set, I think there's a series of 5 or 6 of them. They're very, very good.
Yeah, and I'll put all your stuff. We'll get links and stuff up for everybody too, so they know how to reach you and they know how to get onto your products and things like that. So, yeah, for those of you listening, I wouldn't rush right now. We'll have links and things like that. So, get you over to Glenn's page and things like that. So,
but getting back again, especially with a young person that wanted to learn to start trapping, I would say target coon. They're fairly easy to trap. You have to get rewards when you're doing anything to keep interested. Yeah. And coyotes can beat you up. They can.
I've heard that.
Yeah. So that probably would not be the first thing I'm going to go after, the coyote.
Yeah, I didn't have that advice. I was like, I'm going after coyotes. Yeah, and just raccoons just started showing up. Okay, so we got the bait, and again, those of you out there, there's listening. Obviously, if you're an outdoorsman, you've been to an outdoor, gun shop, Cabela's, Bass Pro, local, whatever. You've seen the different types of lures and baits and things like that out there. So, to me, I bought that stuff because I'm like, I don't know, and I just started experimenting. I'm like, well, here's this, here's that. Same thing with like deer lures. Once you start understanding how, again, the ecology of the species you're going after. How does a deer scent communicate? What does it do with its tarsal gland versus its forehead gland versus its interdigital gland, and you can make mock scrapes, mock rubs, and deer hunters are like, oh yeah, been doing that forever. It's no different trapping. Like you're trying to replicate. These certain things. So let's talk about, again, it's going to be hard to outline because we don't have, a video demonstration yet, which we will. But talk about, if you can, kind of the placement of the trap. As far as how you're approaching, like setting that, as far as like structure and guidances. And I know just seeing videos, people are trying to guide the animal into almost like an ambush, if you will, into that thing.
You do. Like on a coyote, I try to set back about 8 inches, approximately, to the center of my pan. And I don't guide super heavy.
So you're talking about the hole, right?
Yes,
so you're talking about the bait hole, taking your hole, where you're going to put your bait.
Yes.
And now we're getting ready to do our trap set. So
to the center of the pan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
About 8 inches. And I will subtly guide them, not heavy. I might, take a twig and stick down in, some pebbles maybe. I don't crowd them. A cat you could crowd. A cat you can have it look like a porcupine and it'll work. But you can't a coyote or a fox. You just got to subtly get them to put their foot where you want them to.
Yeah. So it's pretty much probably, site specific. Because that was one of the things I struggle with is I would be, in an ag field, on the corner where a bunch of different areas meet, and I would find scat, I would find tracks. I'm like, this is a good spot. I think there's a highway here of activity for coyotes, and I would see deer tracks, and I'm like, this is a good spot, I think, to put a track or put a set. And I remember like I would get my I bought one of those auger bits for a drill, and I would drill the hole. Work smart, not hard, So I'd go out there and put my hole in the ground, and I would get the trap set, and everything, and I would look at this. I'm like, okay, I know I need to guide this thing to it, but what's a kind of a good approach if there's an easy way to describe it on how to get something to guide? Like, do you want, obviously I would just think there's a spacing not requirement, but recommendation. You don't want too close, you don't want too far away.
Yeah, that's true. Like I say, on a coyote, I like about 8 inches. On a fox, a little closer, maybe 5 or 6 inches.
But I mean, like the like if you're putting a twig or a stick or something guided
outside of the jaws.
Okay.
Yeah. But also, once that animal commits, it's just, if you take your trap up, sometimes you've trapped the month of whatever, November, you come back at the end of December, you're going to look like a bomb went off on that set. Them things that, once they get in there, their feet are working. They're all over the place. So actually, if you got a good bait down that hole, it's committed, you got good lure, it's going to get caught.
Yeah. And so for those of you listening too, maybe you can't visualize it, or maybe you haven't even watched a whole lot of videos yet, or just something you've thought about. But what we're talking about is when you have that bait hole and you've got your trap set, the kind of twigs and things like that we're guiding. We're putting that around the scent hole, and we're trying to guide them to the set placement to put their foot there.
The actual hole you put in will help guide somewhat.
Yeah,
because if you're going in at a 45, I'm not going to say it doesn't happen, but they're going to approach at that 45 so they can see down that hole.
Yeah.
Some of them will work it from the backside.
That was going to be my next question, because I've seen videos too where a lot of guys recommend a double set, on a hole, is because a lot of times they'll catch coyotes on the backside trying to circle the scent hole to see exactly what's going on, and that hole itself is actually the barrier, directing that animal to the set. So you're not going to catch them on the front, but a lot of times they catch them on the back. I don't know if that's true.
I would say that's a fantastic idea. When I go, I'm usually taking vacation and I'm trying to get 75 or 100 sets in a day. I'm not going to set 2 traps at a set.
And that's the other thing too, is time management. So if you're doing like your own property, for instance, and you know what, I'm going to put, I got a dozen traps. I'm gonna put 6 locations out. I'm gonna put a double set each. Yeah, absolutely.
That's fine.
Yeah, it's one of those things on paper. I remember seeing that, because I remember thinking that too. And that's why, one of the reasons why I bought like 3 dozen traps is I'm like, I'm not really gonna set that many, but if I want to do double sets and things like that, and I got a couple properties, like, to me, it makes sense to, 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none, type of thing. So
to me, you can't own too many traps.
Yeah. I'm learning that's the same thing with duck decoys. That's a whole nother topic, because that's another relatively new hobby of mine. And my wife's like, I don't even want to know how much money you've spent on duck. I'm like, yeah, you don't want to know either. But yeah, so that was one thing with the placement. I know it's hard. We'll talk a lot more about this when we do the videoing, and do some demonstrations and stuff like that too, because there's some stuff just visually you need to see, and you need to find a location and be like, okay, the property I'll take you to is a heavy ag property. So we'll talk about ag property. Maybe we'll go into the wooded areas as well and talk about some different habitat settings to put these traps. So for those of you listening, the HuntScience Academy, Patreon page, we'll have this stuff up there. And, as the weather gets nicer here in Northeast Ohio, the weather is just starting to get good. And, I'm sure you can speak to trying to set a bunch of trap sets and describe when your hands are freezing cold.
It's no fun.
It's no fun. And it's not going to make for a good video. So we're going to have to, wait till the weather gets a little bit nicer for that too. And plus, we'll be able to do some things too, because as it's starting to get nicer, spring's coming. The pup rearing is getting ready to happen. The fawns are getting ready to drop, and there's going to be a lot of activity. So, we'll be able to find sign and scat and things like that, and be able to have some good videos for you guys to check out. So that's definitely coming. And a lot of this stuff, like I said, it's going to be hard to. It's like, hey, where do I set a deer stand?
All right.
Well, there's a lot that goes into that question. There's a lot of what ifs. So. Okay, so we've got the placements, we got the hole in there. So now, we start looking at, it's just intriguing to me is you start hearing about the differences that you have to worry about if you're going after coyotes versus a fox coming into that set? Like, what are some of the you hear they're arch nemesis of each other.
They
you
are.
know, so it's like, what are some considerations to take into account, you know, with the interactions that those two are going to have? And I don't know enough about trapping to even take that question any further to ask you.
The interactions, I don't know if I fully understand.
So, you know, like they always say, like, you know, they're going to bury their bait. So you want to really make sure you get your bait down in there nice and deep, maybe cover a hole a little bit, because, you know, if a fox is going to go bury something, you know, a coyote's going to smell it and find it. Like you're kind of placating off of, you know, that too. So setting those traps, I mean, you know, is that something you try to do, or is it just, you're like, you know what, man, I make a hole, I put the bait down in there, and that's kind of how it goes.
Well, you're replicating what a canine does in that dirt hole set. And I will say that's a great set. It caught a lot of fur. But also a big flat set guy, which, you know, we'll have to get into that more when they can actually view it, because I probably, predator trapping, I probably rely on a flat set 75% of the time, more than I do a dirt hole. But the difference is, I'll tell you, if you got a strong coyote fox population, I have had so many fox, I caught the fox, a coyote comes in and just rips them apart in the trap. I mean, they'll eat them. They just,
Well, they'll eat anything.
Yeah.
So talking about a flat set, it just, you know, it's a question for me too, just so I can remember. The flat set is you're still doing a leg hold trap. You're still burying the set, but you're not putting a bait hole down. You're doing like maybe like some lure or something, like some
most
urine,
of the time only
like urine,
only luring urine. Yes.
Yeah. I've seen guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, tend to, on the corner of like ag fields and stuff like that, a lot of times is they go after those flat sets, you know, more like, you know, marking those areas with the urine and things like that on a log. And you know,
a lot of times that dirt hole set, that big flashy dirt hole set, that gets the animal to stop, and it's like, whoa, look at there, what's going on. That flat set, that little subtle flat set, is what'll catch them.
Yeah.
And I got a buddy I've trapped all over the place with, and we jump out of the truck, we're making sets. Most of the time he's putting in a dirt hole, I'm putting in a flat set. It just works.
Tag teaming, man. Just, working smart, not hard. So, you know, I'm thinking back to some of the mistakes I've made, and you know, I know I made a bunch of them, you know, but I remember like even like sifting. So, you know, you get the trap set, right? So you got the trap in the ground, you dug your little hole, and you're getting in there. You know, the sifting of the dirt, you know, that was something that I would think you can't screw that up. But I would also think you can kind of maybe sift too much and make it not look. I just think of like the trail cam, you know, footage, and like, was there something visual that was alarming a little bit? Like, hey, you know, this is here, and then this is real fine, you know, coming up here. Like, because I remember, you know, you hear these trappers saying coyotes don't like things under their feet too much. Yeah, that's soft. Exactly. So when you're making these holes, like, am I leaving too much of a quote unquote mound of sifted dirt that I didn't, you know, spread out good enough or something like that? So I'm just curious on
there's
that.
Another, you know, depends on the trapper, because some of them make a mound on their trap, some of them make a detent over the pan. I make mine flat. I make mine flat.
Yeah.
I take my hands and pack around as much as I can, so I don't have that loose dirt when they step that'll sink down in. And you're going to hear a lot about, dug up my trap.
Yeah,
you know,
I've heard a lot of
trap.
that. Yeah.
Most of the time that's a coon. It come in, that dirt's so soft, it's sinking down, it feels that trap, and it just pulls it out.
Yeah.
If it is a fox will just barely uncover it, where a coon will take it out and flip it upside down. And but I don't think you can overcover it. There's so many different ways. You have to have something to keep that stuff from going under the pan. And you know, there's so many different things.
Yeah, and that's, I'm leaving some of the stuff out. So those of you that are listening, you know, I'm leaving things out. Like, I'm leaving, you know, putting screens down on the pad and stuff like that, because a lot of that stuff, like, the video is going to cover a lot of that stuff. Because I mean, it doesn't. So those of you listening that have some trapping experience and like, what about, you know, it's the stuff's coming, you know, because I mean, there's so many intricate things that, you know, and I don't know, like I said, you know, about it. I watch those videos and I'm like, oh, I need screens. I need to do this. Like, I got this whole stinging bag set up, and I'm like, half stuff in there I didn't even use, you know.
Keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. Yeah, that's a thing too. I tend to not do that. So now we got the trap set. Now we come up and we have what are some of the crazy things that you've seen coyotes do once they're actually on the trap now, get into story time a little bit. You got anything crazy?
I about got bit several times.
Well, yeah,
but
that'll happen.
I can't really think of anything crazy. Most of them lay down. It's just, they're like a docile puppy. You get in a alpha, you're going to know it. It's going to let you know it. And I really can't think of.
Yeah. Yeah, it's there's not a whole lot. I've heard other guys too that have a hard time coming up with some crazy stuff because the crazy stuff doesn't happen all that much. Because like you said, they get pretty docile. But as the question was bringing up, because you set your trap, and maybe there's other than the docile sleeping, trying to get away from you. To those, they expect that, but now what's going on now. Bobcat, different ball game. I've seen bobcats in traps trying to take people's faces off. Type of thing. I don't know what your experience is, but my experience, I've seen that, and you're like, good Lord.
Well, I've caught bobcats, a fair amount of them, and I don't know. I don't have no good stories on them either.
I remember a couple of times, having for some radio collaring and trapping bobcats, and you're like, good Lord, that is a big cat. They're bigger than what people think they are, and that thing's just trying to, a couple times trying to take your face off. They're trying to get away from you too. But as you start getting closer, especially for like radio collaring, like you're not dispatching that animal,
right.
So it's like, well, now you're coming in like strike range, and you got to use Y poles and things like that to pin them down, and it's just they're going crazy.
I wish we could get a season in Ohio on bobcats.
Yeah, what do you think on that? I mean, do you think that's something in the future? You think the numbers are going to come back enough?
Sometime in the future. I mean, we've got plenty of them here. Everybody knows that.
Except
not next year. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But we keep trying.
Yeah, there's so many different things we go down as far as talking about traps, because it's like you set a trap for a coyote. Well, how do you set? So I mean, just quick. Is there really any difference on setting traps, coyote versus fox, as far as your whole sets? I mean, is it still the approach pretty much the same?
Same. Yeah.
What about bobcats? Is it still pretty much
same?
Yeah. So that makes it easy.
I do some different kind of sets on bobcats, and a bobcat hunts visually more than a
and that's
canine
where people
does.
get the CDs and stuff like that. The
Yes.
movement. Yeah, that makes sense. Cats. I mean, even domesticated cats are the same way.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean. That's where. So you mentioned that. So I always get interested in this. You mentioned that a lot of people, when they get a hold of you, it's because of deer management.
Deer and turkey.
Yeah, deer and turkey.
Yep.
And yeah, that would be a big one too. I don't want to get too much into it because, like I was telling you, I've got other people coming on to get more into the nerdy science of, coyote populations and, how the populations are affected because by trapping and predator control and things like that. Because I obviously deer populations are affected by these predators, right? There's no arguing that. Fawns are eaten and consumed by coyotes and bobcats and bears, and predators are a problem. A lot of times, I think predators get the blame more than what they deserve, and I've seen that in grad school. I've seen, some of the research projects and things like that, to where statistically, there is an effect being on the population, but not near to the extent of what you think it is. I know there was, I don't know when it was. I remember reading a publication from Penn State talking about coyote populations and, that they're more of a compensatory, issue, which basically just means that the coyote population really doesn't have an effect long term on the deer population. And I'm paraphrasing here off of memory, so I might have some of this wrong. So people definitely fact check this. Because the deer populations, obviously we have a high population. I mean, coyotes are not just out there, eating everything or anything but deer fawns. I mean, it's such a wide variety of stuff. So, if you've got a healthy deer population, the natural, ecosystem, you're going to have a balanced herd. The coyote population or the predator population isn't. There's going to be a statistical effect that predation is going to have, but it's not going to be anything where you're like, I need someone like Glenn to come down and eradicate these things. Mm-hmm. You can have a synergistic relationship in nature because predators are important. Predators are needed to control prey species populations. I mean, if you don't have predators, you're going to have an overabundance of a deer population that's going to cause serious degradation to your forest habitat, to agriculture, production, row crops. Just name the list, right? And you're going to need something balanced somewhere. So me as the biologist, I kind of bring on now is the idea of understanding that coyote, or we're just going to say predator management, is one part of the toolbox, because a lot of my podcast listeners are deer hunters and do a lot of deer management. So don't jump to the I need to eradicate these things right away. And I'm curious, with that being said, you go to all these other places. Have you seen areas that you've trapped and then you get a call again, you're like, wow, like I'm catching more than I remember at this spot. Like, are you seeing that increase because of how, you have compensatory reproduction in coyotes and things like that? Are you seeing that anywhere?
Well, again, I'm not a biologist, but I trapped out one deer, I don't know what you call it, lease in Alabama 3 years. And the first year they called me down, I couldn't hardly find a deer track. I mean, they were few and far between. I caught a lot of coyotes, bobcats that year. Second year I went down, I started seeing a few. The third year, I said, man, you're getting a good deer population now. And he said, that's because of you.
Yeah.
And then I moved on after that, so I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
And I'm old enough to remember when Ohio we didn't have deer. And we did a heck of a job building up that population. And when we did, coyotes came in.
Yeah.
And then we didn't have turkeys. And we did a great job building up them turkeys. And when we got them there, bobcats came in.
Yeah. There definitely needs to be a balance, because I tell people, and I'm not a predator expert, but I tell people, if you're going to manage your deer herd, it sounds asinine and really stupid if I say, don't worry about doing a deer population. Don't worry about doing a deer survey. Just go out there and kill this many does and this many bucks at this age. It makes zero sense. People will look at you and go, are you insane? Like, what are you talking about? To me, it's the same thing with a coyote population, but like we were talking before, there's not an easy way to survey your property for coyotes or predators like there is for deer. The ways that they do surveys for predators and things like that is, I've been a part of them, is, the FLIR, surveys, the forward-looking infrared. Basically, a lot of people put that on a drone or something like that. Those are thousands of dollars. Like on my drone, I looked at getting a FLIR camera for mine, but it was like $5,000, and I'm like, I don't have enough people asking me to do that to justify me getting that thing. And then what's the other way? Well, you're going to run a helicopter and do an aerial count. Are you going to do, the track mark and release? You're going to trap them. Have someone like you come out. Well, then you got to buy radio collars. Those aren't. What are you going to do with the data if you don't know what you're doing? So there's not an easy way. So I feel for people because it's a challenging thing. Like that property you were talking about. You go down there and you said, the deer population was high because you're taking out the predators, right? And there's a case in point. If you're a landowner and you're doing that year after year after year, nothing is done without consequence. You're going to have a great deer population for a while, but there's going to be a diminished return.
Oh, absolutely.
The carrying capacity of your habitat is going to diminish to the point to where now you're not going to have a deer population, and you think it's a predator problem, and it's not. So, I encourage people listening to this, I always tell people, understand the why you're doing something. Why do you want to hire Glenn to come out and trap? Are you absolutely sure it's a predator problem? Have you had a biologist evaluate your habitat, look at things like that, do a deer survey and say, look at the body scores of the deer and say, hey, you know what? Hey, your habitat is good. Your deer have good weights. Everything's good. And your numbers have diminished over the past couple of years. And yeah, you know what? There probably is a predator problem. But now you have at least some evidence to back that up. So I just get curious. That's the type type of stuff as a biologist, I rely on guys like you to come to me when I'm doing deer management programs for people. Hey, they'll tell me like, hey, I got Glenn Trapper, doing a trapping program. Oh, really? Like, yeah, I'd like to talk to him. Are you keeping track of, year one, how many did you catch? Year two, was it a male? Was it a female? What was its weight? Did you do this, do that? And if not, and you don't, but when you get these big deer leases and things like that, where these guys are bringing people from all over the country, they're costing thousands of dollars to go hunt these big bucks or whatever, like they'll spend the money to have someone come in there. And as a biologist, like, well, I want to know, what was it? Was it a male? What was its size? I'm going to cut open its stomach. Like, what was this thing eating? I want to know everything I can know about this. Mm-hmm. Again, you're not going to do that, but the landowner might, hey, Eric, Glenn caught these 6 coyotes down here. Do you want to come down and do your thing? Yeah. Let's go get the data, because that's going to be valuable information. So, people out there, always ask the why. And if you're going to get into trapping or ask a trapper to come in, start putting into some things, because they're going to want to, I'm sure you're going to want to know, like, hey, what's going on? What do you got going on? Type of thing. So
in the right kind of habitat, though, you're never going to eradicate.
No.
It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Because, there's a relationship there. Like you said, you have a deer population, now you have some coyotes. Yeah, they're going to come back because they're predators. They follow the prey.
That's right.
And it's, you tend to see areas, at least in my experience, you go out there and do see areas where I'm doing like habitat restoration, and I'll talk with the landowner and be like, man, I don't have a coyote problem out here like I thought I would, and I get out there and I'm like, man, I've seen very little signs of deer. I've seen very little rabbit sign. I've seen, and you can do forage, little forage, surveys to see, if a deer versus a rabbit, you can kind of tell how it's been on there. And there's nothing here for that thing to eat. And I always tell them, like, well, that may be the point, but once we start doing this, and now you start getting rabbits, now you start getting more, small ground dwelling mammals like moles and voles and and other rodents and turkeys. I'm like, you're gonna have them, and then you're gonna have foxes, and then you're gonna have the competition between a fox and a guy. I said, you're going to have it. So predator management definitely needs to be something that you put into consideration for your management plan. Oh, that was long-winded, but yeah, it's just, these are questions that I get curious about, because, I don't know anybody until now that's gone to Alabama and Louisiana to trap. Like, every people I talk about is, Joe Blow back 40. Yeah, I've caught some coyotes on my logging road or whatever. And you're like, oh, okay. Like, trying to get information out of them is like, pulling teeth.
I've got a friend. He's a government trapper in Wyoming, sheep country. And these guys used to use DDT. Of course, you can't anymore. Gitter guns. They still aerial gun them. I mean, they're just after them coyotes all year long. They're just always after them. And they never go away. They just keep coming in.
Yeah, and they're not, too. And that's another warning I give people, because, so you've heard me say a couple of times this compensatory reproduction. It's a reproduction process that some species will go at, that they will exhibit, and coyotes are one of those. And basically what it means is, the reason why you got to be careful is because if you remove a coyote from your property, or a certain percentage of coyotes off your property, depending on what the pack is like, that's going to stimulate the females to throw more pups than they normally would. So you're like, damn it, man, like, Glenn's been out here 6 years in a row, and Glenn's loving it, but I'm not, because these damn coyotes are everywhere.
Yep.
Well, there's a reason for that, or maybe, like we were talking again, before the podcast, here in Ohio, having a pack of 4 adults is a big pack. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people get into this false sense of security by schwacking coyotes, because they live in areas where you don't have these big packs. You've got a single breeding pair, and they're pups, and you kill one of them, and you're pretty much your problem until another pack or something kind of takes over. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of things that can be a problem if you got a pack I've seen this happen too. You get a smaller pack, like of, 2 breeding pairs. You have the alpha pair and the non-alpha breeding pair. Let's say you take out the male of the alpha, breeding pair. Well, that pack's gonna split up, a lot of times, and now they're gonna go off into a different territory, and now they're like, hey, there's that biochemical trigger, to go on there and increase the pup rate, and now you've created a problem somewhere else, or maybe even so on here, and their home ranges are pretty big. I think a average home range, quote me on here, like 1,000, 1,500 acres or something like that. I think some of the nomadic ones have been known to cover like 6,000 square acres or something. It's some crazy numbers. Dr. Carl Miller had a good presentation on that one time. This was years ago. I saw that, but they had some radio collar data, so it's out there. You can see that, but it's things to take into consideration, because you could have a nice male coyote that you've taken out, but that didn't do anything to your product. That was a nomadic coyote that was whatever. So just because you kill a coyote, that's where having an understanding of the data of your property comes into play. It's an important thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so let's see, what do we cover here? So we got the traps, we got that. It's just so many different ways I'm going to take this.
Body traps for water trappers, we haven't hit on them at all.
Yeah, that's where I was going to go into next. I was trying to think, because that's why I asked about the fox and the bobcat, because no sense covering that. So the Coney bear traps, or the body traps. Yeah. Okay, the Coney bear. So those ones, I think people have a lot more problem with on those, and I don't know why. And I only say that because, again, my experience, I've seen recently, where did I see that? It was on a Facebook page, but I can't remember what it was. And people were talking about the body hold traps and being an issue. People just didn't like it. Oh, that comes down and snaps their neck. It's like, that's a humane way.
It's a very humane
for
way
that thing to go.
In Ohio, 5-inch by 5-inch is the largest you could set on land. And I don't have a problem with that, to tell you the truth. Because most dogs they'll get their snout snapped, and it's not going to hurt them. Everything bigger than that's got to be in water. Either in water or totally submerged, like a 10 by 10 inch big
for
trap.
beaver on a beaver slide or something like that.
And they're a very efficient tool. But they got a bad rap because of that. And Ohio has never been one where you could set a big one on land. But back when people used to dog hunt a lot, they killed a lot of dogs with them things.
Yeah.
So
what's the, and maybe this is a misconception. I really don't have an answer to this, so I don't know. I'm genuinely asking. With the Coney bear traps, what's the percentage of having non-lethal right away? Like it gets like mid abdomen, like mid body. Is that something, or is the traps designed where that really can't happen?
Well, what you want to call a suitcase catch is right behind the head and
I've heard
the body,
that term.
and it's almost instant death. It's very
so there's
short.
really no way that an animal could go through one of those body traps and get halfway and get trapped.
Never say
way.
never.
Well, yeah, never say never, but it's highly
unlikely. Yeah.
I've never seen one happen like that. So
I've never caught anything like that.
Okay.
I've heard of it.
Okay.
But I've never seen it. And, Canada especially is doing a lot of testing on humane traps. And that's what they want, the body traps. That's what they really push.
Yeah, you see it all the time. I see it a lot.
I will tell you, you're not going to catch a coyote in a body trap. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah. You know what? I wanted to touch back, speaking of that, kind of backtrack here a little bit. Cage traps.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on those? I know people that are like, don't even waste your time. And guess what I did? I bought a big coyote cage trap, and I've never used it.
Well, probably not. I've never caught a coyote in a cage trap.
Well, I'm the idiot that those manufacturers are like,
I've
go watch
caught a
this
ton
YouTube.
of coon in cage traps. I've caught some red fox. My daughter caught a red fox last year in one.
Okay.
I've never caught a coyote in one. Never.
I've caught a lot of raccoons and groundhogs in my cage traps.
Yes.
I'm talking like the big coyote one that's bigger than his table. So another off the wall question. I've always been curious. Like when I set these traps, I get paranoid I'm going to catch a skunk. All right, because I'm
love
like
skunks.
Yeah, but I don't. Like I don't want to get sprayed. I came close one time, and I'm like, nope. I still smelled it for days. I'm like,
you will.
I'm like, only imagine if that thing got me. Like, what's the approach on if you are trapping skunks? what's the best? I know they make skunk specific like tube traps and things like that, but I
if
mean,
you're going to coyote trap, if you're going to fox trap, if you're going to coon trap,
it's
you're going to
inevitable.
catch
It's
skunks.
inevitable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to catch them. I just do.
How do you not get sprayed? Like, how do you get close enough not getting sprayed?
Well, if you in a cage trap, catch a lot of them in cage traps. Now, if I got one in a cage trap, I take a tarp or a blanket, hold it in front of me,
So they get that.
and I just talk to it real low. And as long as it's still looking at you, you're fine. If it turns around, you better stop.
Well, your size, your trap probably comes into account too, because if it's a big enough trap where it can turn around and lift its tail, and
If it turns around, you're going to get
getting it.
So
Yeah.
stop
Yeah.
immediately. And it takes a while for that skunk to build that scent up, so it doesn't want to just throw it everywhere. Yeah. And same thing if it's in a leg hold, talk to it, get low to the ground. They make these syringes, and you put acetone in them, and you get up there within 3 feet, and you give them a shot, and they go to sleep, and that's all there is to it.
or you get a 22 with a good scope.
If you get a 22, it's going to spray 100% of the time.
Really? I've
100%.
never dispatched a skunk, so I'm
Yeah.
like in my head, oh, there's a skunk there. I'm gonna be 50 yards away from this thing.
No, I want to be 3 feet.
I'm a damn good shot, so I'm like, no, I wouldn't be that far from it. But I'm like, okay, where's it?
They just
facing?
release when you shoot.
Oh
them, they
yeah,
release, and-
I spent a lot. I spent prior to my time as a wildlife biologist, I was in veterinary medicine. So I've been around that to where euthanizing animals and stuff, they always release their bowels, and it's a common thing. Yeah. So that's always like in my head, like 'cause my dad lives out in the country, and he's always like, these damn skunks, and I'm like. I don't want to trap them because I'm like, I don't want to catch a skunk. Like, I don't know.
I get excited when I hear skunks.
Well, there you go. I'm calling you next time. Yeah.
That's when I went back to my family that they didn't really trap. Well, my dad, during the Depression, skunks were a very sellable fur, and that's all he trapped was skunks. So I did learn a little bit
God
from
bless
him.
him. Yeah, to me, there's certain things I just don't mess with. I'm just like, it just ain't worth it, man. Like the one time I get skunked or sprayed, I'm just gonna be, just aggravated, But yeah, I wanted to touch on that. You come most people. Okay, so going back to the Kona bear traps, what are your, that type of trap? What's the snares? I know.
Snares, yeah.
So I know the one guy that I was telling you. There's a guy I used to talk to. I don't even remember how I met him, but he was based out of Southington area. Or maybe he was in Southington area, but he was close to here, old timer. But man, did he love snares, and
Great tool.
Yeah,
Great tool.
I just when I talk about trapping, I think a lot of people have the issues with coney bears and snares, looking at it as inhumane, type of thing. So snares.
Growing up, snares weren't legal when I was trapping. I never dreamed they would ever be. And when they did legalize them, they pretty much legalized them here in Ohio. We don't have a whole lot of tough laws when it comes to snaring.
Yeah. That's what I knew that. I read that because you try to find them. There's not a whole lot on
There's
them.
not a whole lot on them.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So we're lucky in that way. And why would they wouldn't like them? If set properly, you catch deer with them. And there's a lot of bad information about setting them that you're going to catch a deer. And if we get out in the woods, I'll show you some of the things not to do.
Yeah, definitely. I got a little outline for that.
And also dogs. But if you got a dog that's been on a leash or even chained in the yard, something that knows control, he'll get in a snare and he'll sit there and wait for you to come and release him. He doesn't fight it. A coyote will fight
Well, the
it.
fighting is what terminates them.
Yes.
It's what terminates them. Yeah, so the snares was always one, and man, I got a buddy of mine that does a little bit of trapping, and if I remember right, I think he likes using snares. To me, I'm just like, man, like that seems like an intricate thing. There's a lot to take into account as far as where to set it, how to set it, like to get them to go in there. Yeah,
but again, they're not magic, and they're a very good tool.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of people love snares. I don't have any. Never played around with them. For me, I'm like, I'm going to get a foothold trap. Most of my trapping, if I do any, is in ag fields and surrounding. I can drive up to with an ATV or my truck and set either a flat set or a whole set and just be done, type of thing. I really don't have a whole lot of interest in going in and trying to snare and things like that, Yeah, it's again, the video will be good because I'm curious to see, how to set those because I just never really got into it, obviously. So the coney bears, now let's talk about into like some water trapping. So, the coney bears, a lot of people, like you mentioned, use them for beavers and even muskrats and things like that, the smaller ones for the holes. and things. So what are some of the type of ways if you're going after? Let's start with a muskrat. Is the coney bear trap really the only way if you're looking at aquatic
a
trap?
bear is that's a brand name like Kleenex.
Okay, so body trap.
It's a body trap. And again, when I was young, we had so many muskrats around. It was just absolutely crazy. But you could find their holes, you could find their trails. Very simple. You set those, you stabilize them so they're not flopping all over, and they just work great. And even in most smaller creeks or even a river you get into, if it's a little grassy, you can tell where there's trails going through there. The animals are going to use those too.
Yep.
So you just put it right in the middle of that, stabilize it good and strong, and they work.
Yeah, the aquatic trapping is interesting. My buddy that I'm thinking about, he's schwacked a lot of muskrats. But I remember a couple of the coyotes that I got. I had a lady, a friend of mine, family friend, call one time. Had some raccoon problems, and there were some aquatic areas. And what I was doing was, it actually worked pretty well, and it might have just been a fluke, I guess. But I would take my little fishing lures, the little crawfish, rubber crawfishes and stuff. And I remember dumping some scent and stuff on them. But I was like, I'm putting in the water. I don't know if this is gonna matter, but I was like, it ain't gonna hurt, type of thing too. So I put that down in there to have that visualization. And sure enough, I got one on there, reaching down in there trying to grab that thing. And
you don't hear about it as much anymore. They used to make gold and silver fish that you could put on the pan of your trap, set it in the water, or a lot of people would take tinfoil and put it on their pan.
Something shiny.
Yeah, and you don't hear as much of that anymore, but it used to be a common thing.
And I didn't even know that, until I had read it somewhere. And for me, I'm just like, well, it makes sense. They see something down there to grab it,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's I remember following him around, my buddy, and he was telling me, because he has a couple ponds on his property, and he's like, damn muskrats, they're out here, and you can see the holes in the banks and things like that. And yeah, the aquatic trapping seems, I don't want to say easier, but I think it's easier for a novice to see the sign that the presence of the animal is there. A beaver slide is pretty hard to miss.
Yeah.
A muskrat hole in a bank is pretty hard to miss.
Yeah.
Those types of things. And obviously that's where you focus on putting the trap. So
set on sign.
So like you were saying, the success, with raccoons, would it be fair to say, like, oh no, if you want to go after a raccoon, also maybe go after something like a muskrat, because again, you can almost find a muskrat hole pretty much any body of water that you spend some time looking around.
And set on sign.
Yeah.
When you're trapping coyotes in Ohio, that could be a little trickier. They don't leave as much sign. You go down south and there's so much more sign than there is up here. I don't know why that is.
That's crazy.
I'm just not sure.
I haven't done a whole lot of work down south, so
But you'll come to a stall out area where, droppings up here, if we find one or two, oh, wow. And there'll be 50 of them in a, 20-foot circle. It's just, I don't know why.
Yeah, I got a pretty good coyote population on out in my house in my area. I hear them out there quite a bit, and there's at least, I would estimate at least 4, adults running around out there. I see scat pretty regular. Again, another reason on here too. We'll probably use my property as one of the areas and maybe set some traps too, and look at that too, because I think I might want to get some of them out too. I got my bird dogs and they're my babies. I will go on a coyote hunting spree if they so much as look at my dog wrong. So I'm out there and I seen I've heard them a lot, but I didn't see a whole lot of sign. But now I'm starting to see a lot more sign. I'm not hearing them as much, but I'm seeing more sign. So they're definitely there. And I'm like, yeah, it's time to maybe start looking into this. But I'm not, the damn things, I'm not getting them on trail camera. Even in the areas where the sign is, it's really starting to aggravate me. Like I've set multiple cameras up, and the cameras are working and everything's fine. They're good cameras, and it just, damn things are eluding me, man. I don't get it, and it's frustrating because now I'm like, well, now I try to set a hole and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I can't even catch them on a camera, and let alone in a hole, so type of thing. So yeah, it's frustrating, but yeah, I look at that, and there's some of the areas where I'm like, well, I probably could put a snare here, but there's also a lot of deer movement there, and the deer are going to get screwed up and not know what's going on. It's where it's hard, and I understand the struggle for people, because I'm like, you look at this, and there's too much information out there now that you just don't even know where to begin.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So we touched a little bit on, obviously aquatics and podcasts like this. I was thinking about how to approach it, and it's hard to really get into specifics. Something like this, a topic like this is best served on video demonstration and topics like that. So for those of you listening, I definitely understand that, and we're going to have a good, series on there. So, for you too, one of the things that we're doing is we have this HuntScience Academy thing that I've got on there, and I want to have a trapping section on there to where, like 5-10 minute videos, how to's, and okay, this is how to prepare a new trap, and this is what to do to an old trap, how to, whack it, just that kind of stuff, for people to look at, and you can get on YouTube and do it too, I guess. But so now let's talk a little bit about the post trap. So you got the animal, you dispatch this animal, let's talk a little bit about the fur, as far as, go back to, what it was like, growing up, cost of fur and the need for fur, and kind of where we are today with the prices of fur, because people are going to want, is it something you're doing for a deer management for your property, or do you want to get some money off it?
Today is there's more people getting into it as deer and turkey managers, even if it's a small area. When I got into it, I don't know why I did it. I just did it because I like to. But, of course, during the fur boom, there was people making their living off of it. I mean, there was big money into it. When that dropped off in the 80s, and I kept doing it because I loved it. That was my hobby. I deer hunted a little bit. I did other stuff, but trapping was my thing. And I heard this so many times, not picking on deer hunters, but I heard this so many times, you can't make any money at that. I said, yeah, probably not. How much did you make deer hunting last year?
How much did you spend deer hunting
exactly.
last year? Yeah.
But today, at that time, and we'd see a little bit of a fur raise up, people start trapping, and it would drop off and it'd stop. I get so many people today, I talk to them all the time. We're not in this to make any money. We're trying to help the population, the quail population or whatever. And most of them tan their own fur or have it tanned, maybe give it to friends.
Yeah.
It's a totally different mindset, which I'm so grateful for. What's going on today. And will there be another fur boom? Absolutely. It's going to happen again.
Yeah, it'll happen too. Because you start looking again. I look at like Steve Ranella on his shows and stuff, and he talks about beaver gloves and things like that. And I never really put too much thought into that. Definitely, things come back around.
Oh yeah,
and that's the other thing too. Is like we were talking, the misconceptions of trapping. There's misconceptions with deer hunting. I get in, like in my classes I teach. I always have a week that we talk about, hunting as a form of conservation, and in today's age of society and social culture and things like that, you get these kids in there that are. They don't even understand what they're talking about, and they're like, "Oh, hunting is bad," all this other stuff, and it's like, okay, so what do you think is going to happen? A lot of the trophy hunting thing, right? As people are like, "Well, what do you think is going to happen to the I don't know, number 200 tags for a certain species in Africa, let's say? If you protest hunting, what do you think is going to happen, to that 200 animals?
Yeah,
they're going to die.
Some way they're going to die.
Yeah, and now the local population of indigenous people and things like that, they rely on that stuff, man, and that money that goes into their culture and into their their livelihood. They rely on the money that the stimulus that the economy has from these hunts, because like, what do you think people go down there and just say, yep, 500 of these we're going to take out? They have biologists, they have state agencies that are out there saying, hey, we got to control this predator or this prey species because, there's an ecological problem going on here. And it's like that problem's going to get solved whether you allow people to go there hunt or not. It's the same thing with trapping. People just don't understand it.
And coming from somebody that's been very in touch with the outdoors, even in high school when everybody else was dating and partying, I was in the woods.
Attaboy.
Mother Nature is very cruel.
Oh, yeah.
Very cruel.
Yeah.
If these animal rights would learn a little bit, they would not think we were so bad.
And you got to applaud people with podcasts being as popular as they are now. Guys like Joe Rogan and even Steve Rinella and these guys that are so much advocates for hunting and things like that. They talk about it like exactly what you said. Go follow the social media page Nature is Metal. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I haven't.
I'll show you when we're done. And I turn people to that all the time because I know people that are like anti-hunt. Yeah, look at this. Look at what happens. To what a lion does to a gazelle. This is how that animal died. Or let me show you a video of a zebra getting eaten alive.
Well, there's several videos around of 2 coyotes killing deer. And it's not pretty.
And it's the same thing with bear here in North America. As people are like, "Oh, the cute bear! That bear will rip your face off." There's a video that I saved again on that Nature's Metal page. There was a cinnamon phase. I can't remember. I have to look it up. I think it's a cinnamon phase black bear. It wasn't. I don't think it was a grizzly. I think it was a cinnamon phase black bear, but it was in the backyard of a residential. You don't see the front of the house, but as a description, like a cul-de-sac development, and this bear is on top of this deer, just toying with it and just killing this thing slowly.
Yeah,
like that. Like you're gonna complain because I shot that deer with an arrow and it didn't go 10 yards and is dead. It died. Versus this video, and you're going to tell me exactly like you said, nature is brutal.
Very.
And it's the same thing. You look at these coyotes. What do you think is going to happen to a coyote that is starving to death? Mm-hmm. That's a horrible way to go.
Absolutely. Or mange. That's another thing.
Yeah, horrible. Yeah. All the canine things. I think people have. There's a lot of people in society that look at outdoorsmen as cruel people. It's like, dude, it's the complete opposite. We're here to allow you to enjoy, not allow is the bad word here, but give you the opportunity to better enjoy nature.
And who pays for all that?
Us.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on that, buddy. I've gotten into some arguments with people that anti-hunters, but they love to kayak, they love to bike. Who do you think paid for that?
Yeah.
That canoe livery or that boat ramp or whatever I did.
That's right.
And you're going to complain because I know there were some states in some areas where we're looking at a $10 a yearly kayaking license on whatever. Yeah, absolutely. What it costs for a hunter to buy 2 or 3 tags and all stuff we do. It's like, come on, man, grow up a little bit here.
That's right.
But yeah, you look at that and the conceptions because I mentioned I was fishing today. Down at the river down here in town. I look at this, and I was down there yesterday. It was the first day I've been down there in a long time, actually. And there's glass everywhere. There's garbage everywhere. And you know what I saw, fishing a little bit with some people yesterday and today, not everybody, but you can tell the real outdoorsmen because, you have snagged up fishing line and stuff like that. It gets thrown in the garbage.
Yeah.
You take it up there and you throw it in the garbage.
Yeah.
You take care of the resources that are around you. I'm down there fishing. I'm not leaving trash down there.
Right.
I'm not throwing bottles down there and partying and things like that. It's not us that's causing the problem. It's other people.
Yes.
And a lot of times it's the people that, are the ones screaming, at the highest mountaintop.
Yeah.
Right. How many, I've seen people throw gum down. I'm like, you know how many birds that kills?
Yeah.
You know how many birds die because they're picking gum up off the blacktop because you're too lazy to walk 10 feet and spit your gum out. And, my kids do it all the time, and I tell them, pick that up. And I'll show them photos of certain species, whether it's sparrows or whatever, urban in the stuff that they're finding. Mm-hmm. In these, it's like, pick your stuff up. Like, you don't see us doing that. And you see a lot of these conservation organizations and that have river cleanups. They have all this stuff. So it's like people look at us and it's like, hey man, don't be like telling me that I'm a horrible person because we're trapping coyotes. I'm like, yeah, it needs to be done. That coyote, that individual coyote drew the short straw. It sucks. But you know what? That animal was going to die some way, and it could have been hit by a car. It could have been a starvation or a disease, and it would have died slow. almost always an animal is not going to have the luck of an instantaneous death.
No.
You know, like,
And you said hit by a car. I've gotten to this with quite a few people. Oh, you guys are so cruel. No, we're not. But you hit an animal with a car, that's a cruel death. The chances of them dying right then are not very high. And they're going to crawl off and die in a day or two.
Yeah, and this definitely is not for everybody, because there are, obviously we're dealing with people, and people suck, a lot of times. But at least in people that I know, my experience, my circle, I mean, people that are actual hunters, like, you do anything long enough, you're gonna make a mistake, and I've shot deer that were not the best shot. The animal died, pretty quick, but not anything like an ethical shot would, or, a well-placed shot would really be. And you feel terrible. Like, and there's something wrong with you, man, if you don't feel, any harm for that, and I think there's a lot of people that don't get into hunting or even trapping or anything like that because of how they think it's going to make them feel. And it's like, yeah, man, you're human, I feel bad when I kill a deer. You sit there as an outdoorsman, you sit there and you say thanks, and you take a photo of that animal to keep that animal going. Even does that I shoot, yes. I take a photo of it, and I remember that animal, and I have it in my phone. I have a folder on my computer for all the animals that I've harvested, and it's like, it may not be the biggest, even the button buck, you kill a button buck. Yeah, man. It is what it is. I'll throw it on social media. I'm not ashamed of it. You know what? It came through, and I probably should have paid more attention, but everyone who's hunted has killed a button buck.
That's exactly right.
So
that's exactly right.
I get on this, and I get a little fired up when we talk about it, because it's just, you hear people just talk about it. They just don't understand it, and it's,
I also think we're getting farther and farther away from the way a lot of us grew up in rural.
Yeah,
we knew where dinner come from. We understood that stuff, and as we get pushed more and more into city, and young people don't understand it. They just don't.
Excuse me. Look at what happened with the pandemic. People, when things started to become short, and the grocery in the beginning, man, it was hard to find ground beef and stuff.
Yeah.
And I told my wife, I said, listen, we'll be fine. I mean, if it came down to it, we had plenty of food and stuff like that. And I said, yeah, if it comes down to it, we'll be fine. It's you're not gonna eat 3 meals a day, but society started, and at that time too, remember the George Floyd things, and I mean there was a lot of uncertainties, man. I'm like, hey man, society starts breaking down a little bit. Like, the outdoorsmen are going to be the one that everyone's going to be calling. Hey, what do you have? Do you have any deer meat? Do you have any of this? And I told my wife too, like, starting this year. I'm going back to doing more hunting like I used to. Over the past 5-6 years, I just, not that I don't enjoy hunting. It's just, my kids are getting older, and they're getting into more sports and stuff. And both my daughters play travel softball, and anyone who's listening knows that, how the demand for that. I just don't get the stand time.
Life gets in the way.
Yeah, not that I don't enjoy it, but it's like, I started duck hunting, and you go duck hunt in the morning, you got about an hour, and then you're done, and I'm like, damn, man, that was so much fun. It's like, I gotta go sit at a deer stand all day. I don't have time for that, but I told her, I said, listen, the pandemic and the way things are going, and even now with what's going on in the world, you don't know what's coming down. And it's like, yeah, we can't be caught, off guard like that again. Mm-hmm. It's like now, this past deer season, I was pretty selective. I ended up catching COVID, during the rut. My rut was going pretty good, and I was, even before that, I was getting pretty selective. I was getting picky, and then I'm like, damn it, I shouldn't have been that picky. I was like, I could have had, a lot of meat in the freezer.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of those. Yeah, so so we covered the aquatic. That's a good thing on there. Different types of traps, the fur bearing. In all honesty, I mean, as someone who's trapped their whole life, is it for the new person aspiring, is it even something to consider as far as preparing and trying to sell your fur? Or is it something that was like, hey, get into trapping, a little bit more because you're going to bite off more than you can chew, if you will.
I think if you have a mentor and you can learn to do it, you should.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Are you going to go into it expecting to make money? No, you shouldn't.
Yeah.
If you can learn even to do it yourself, which is another great hobby, to learn to tan it yourself.
Yeah.
Great Christmas gifts, great gifts for your neighbors, whatever. The farmer let you trap. They love that stuff.
And plus, you look at it too to pay for your traps. If you can sell a couple hides, pay for your traps. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's an interesting topic because it's something that like I said, I just don't know a whole lot about because I watched the videos and stuff, and you learn the lingo a little bit. And I think anyone listening to this who maybe hasn't trapped, I think can relate to that. You start hearing the different things. But
sure,
when you start talking to people, and you're like, oh, that was way wrong. But I started, it's the same thing with deer hunting. It's the same thing. I mean, people can get on YouTube, and I'm sure there's a YouTube video, how to deer hunt.
Oh, I bet there is.
Yeah. And honestly, that'd be an interesting thing to look up. I've never even looked at that before. But yeah, it's because I've done the same thing with ducks, Again, this past year, like I've got a lot of videos saved on ducks, but even up in game bird like pheasant and stuff like that. I've got 2 German short-hair pointers, so when I started hunting those, I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, I do a lot of upland game bird work as a biologist, so I can identify habitat and things like that, but I'm like, you train a dog. I'm like, you can screw that up too. Like it just, it's like no matter what we do as outdoorsmen, it's a curse almost to be passionate about that kind of stuff because everything's interesting and it's one of the most expensive hobbies you could have.
It is.
It's
my wife passed away about 10 years ago, but she's like, I was all over the place. I said, but I always circle back.
Yeah. That's the same thing. I mean, you look at, deer hunting. Okay, well, you're going to bow hunt. Yeah, you priced bows lately, like a good bow. I've seen a few.
My son's a bow hunter.
Yeah, so. I'm a big bow hunter. My last bow, I keep saying I'm due to buy a new one, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
I bought my bow back in 2010. It's PSE. I have a PSE Dream Season. I think I paid $900 back then, bare bow. And everything I've got on it, maybe even more than that, I can't remember. But I mean, now you look at some of these bows; they're so expensive. They're more expensive than guns. It's then I'm going to gun hunt. So now you got to buy a shotgun, and then all of a sudden, now you're allowed to use straight wall cartridges in Ohio. So now I got to buy a 350 Legend or 450 or. I think I'm going to do elk. Now I got to buy a Win Mag, or now I got to buy, this. And you're like, good Lord. The tree stands are $200 a pop. It's just, people sit there and they're like, yeah, you hunters. Yeah. You know how much, I forget the number, but it's billions of dollars a year that get put into the economy because of hunters. Yeah. Whether at the state level, the Pittman-Robertson Act, and other acts and things like that. If you buy, percentage of the purchase for outdoor hunting gear goes there to conservation and things like that. Like, Roosevelt and those days of the things they've done for conservation. I mean, people don't realize that.
No, not at all.
That $200 deer stand I bought, like that money. There's money that did good, with that. So. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some things here. We covered a lot of things that I wanted to cover. I'm trying to think of some other stuff that, that would be easy to talk about and not have to be on a video. The video portion I think is pretty big, but so why don't you, let's kind of wrap this up here. Why don't you take a minute to, tell people where they can find you. I know you have a Facebook page.
I do.
But tell people, about your trapping company and things like that. And the
my traps are, it's Wolf Creek Products, and I've got a website, wolfcreekproducts.net, not .com, .net.
Yeah.
I also have a Facebook page for that. I make very affordable traps. I think for somebody getting into it, I'm not trying to overprice anything. This is not what I do for a living, so believe me, it's a love. It's and I will hit on something there with my traps. I started off with certain traps that I really liked. Northwoods, which have been out of business for quite a while now. My first trap that I built, I copied their trap 100%. People say I'm a trap inventor. No, I'm not. I copied their trap. There's a dogless variety, which I really like for coyotes, and Montgomery made those over in Pennsylvania. They've been out of business for quite a while too. but I took that original trap and put their dogless system onto it. So that's the traps I make now, except for the Diablo. That is me.
How's a pan lock without a dog on it?
Oh, you'd almost have to see it, but it's got a lock on it.
Yeah, I have to see
it comes up on the jaw. Coyotes are bad for chewing on traps, and they'll chew your dog up. So you go back the next day, you can't even set that trap. It's so chewed up. With a dogless, that don't happen.
Just the visual of that, because I know with even the dog set, it's like you're holding a thing like a plate. You're like just staring at it, like do not go off.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, yeah. But yeah, I'll have links, all that stuff on here. I'll get onto your Facebook page, and I'll get links and everything for everybody. I mean, I'm assuming you'll ship anywhere.
Oh, I'll ship anywhere.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and like I said, those you listen to, I'll have updates on when the video content's going to be up. With the weather starting to break, I'm sure we'll get together here pretty soon and start doing stuff, because I need to start getting that content up and ready and things like that. So,
and if you do get to any of the summer shows or the Ohio State Trappers, and if you see me, I'd sure like it if you come up and said hi.
Yeah, I am going to. I still have the website open. July 20. The only problem I run into with these is my daughter's softball schedule. I have no life in the summer on the weekends, so if I tell my wife I'm going to miss a game because of a Trappers Association, it's going to be a problem probably. And I have 2 daughters, so I have 3 wives. So the 13 and 10.
They are very kid friendly, very kid friendly.
That's another thing too to touch on maybe before we close here. I am always looking for ways. My oldest daughter, she's just not into it, which is fine. She's not into hunting at all. Things like that. She likes being outside. There's been inklings of her getting upset because my youngest daughter had said, "Dad, I would like to go hunting with you." And I always told my kids, I'm not going to force you. I would love for you to come out. Maybe me being a protective dad, I don't like them up in the tree stand.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And I know some people are like, shit, my kid's up there. I just, it's one of those. I'm like, let's get them used to hunting out of a blind before I get them up into a deer stand, because a blind is going to hide them moving a whole lot more than a deer stand is. So, my youngest daughter would get in. It seems like she's maybe into it. And then my oldest daughter would get aggravated. Like, you didn't ask me. I'm like, well, you never. Anyway, I think trapping out of all of them would be something that would be a good thing to get the kids involved with. Because, if you really break it down what you're doing, you're playing in the dirt. You're playing in the dirt. You can have your kid, help you sift the dirt. You get in here. I need you to dig a little hole right here. Here's a drill with an auger on. You want to dig a hole for Dad? Like going in here and just getting them outdoors. I think
there's a huge thing right now. Women in the outdoors, women trappers, and I wish I could remember. There's a couple sites on Facebook for it.
I got Google pulled up right here.
But it is a very growing thing for women or girls to get into this.
Yeah, I think it's something that, again, I talk to my students about it all the time, because they come to me and they're like, I don't know what I want to do, and I'm like, well, what's your interest? Well, I hunt, and things like that. Okay. Well, you could go work as a wildlife biologist. You could go and here's this. And I mentor students that I have all the time. It's not uncommon for students to email me like, hey, Professor Lance, you remember, and steer them in the right direction. But yeah, I think, people have heard me talk about the heritage because, the National Deer Alliance, which used to be the Quality Deer Management Association, they talk about, the hunting heritage all the time. And to me, now that I'm getting older, it's something that you just don't see. Like in my world, in my community, in my world, my circle, I know a lot of people that hunt, but when I go to teach at the university, hey, how many in here have grown up hunting? It's like 2%.
Yeah.
So it's like you can't extrapolate that data off your circle because you're going to surround yourself with people that have the things that you do, the same interests or whatever. And it's eye-opening because you're like, oh man, and you help doing some, youth sponsor hunts or mentorships and things like that. And I just think it's a good way, especially in today's, society, to get kids. I sound like a broken record. I sound like my dad. but getting kids off the iPad and on there
Well, yes.
and do as I say, not as I do, because with my kids do spend a lot of time on their electronics, but my kids are also at softball 4 or 5 days out of the week. They're out there doing stuff, and my kids will put in the work at lessons and things like that. And I'm like, hey, I get it. I was an athlete. I played college ball and everything like that, and I get it. Like, you need to unwind. So I'm probably a little bit too lenient, with my kids. I understand it a little bit, but at the same time, it's like, hey, get outside. And, they like going out and setting trail cameras with me. So every little piece, and I think, the trapping would be a good way, a way that people don't normally think. Because as dad, hey, let's go out and let's learn how to trap together. Like, I've been doing this. Okay, I'm going to set this trap and let's just see how it does. What's the worst that's going to happen? You catch a coyote. Mission accomplished. What's the worst that happens?
And if you're into history at all, North America was built on fur.
Exactly. There are a lot of good books. I listen to audiobooks more than anything, and I've got some things saved up book wise because Steve Rinello's got a very good book. I'm a big fan of his. He's got a very good book on the bison. The history of the American bison and things like that. And there's a lot of good books out there for people, but people's attention span is just not there anymore.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting, but like we were talking, I think we're going to start seeing another boom with trapping, good or not, because of deer management.
I think so, and I think it's good.
And you're probably seeing it more than I am. I'm not really into trapping, so I don't see it as much, but I hear about it a lot. Almost every conference I go to, almost any seminar that is being put on, almost always there's something related to predator management. And hey, right or wrong, or good or indifferent, like, hey, whatever gets people into it, because like I told you, it is hard, to find someone that traps, and that knows what they're doing. I know people that quote unquote trap, but to sit there and ask them a bunch of questions, like they're not gonna know. Someone like you, how long you been trapping? 30 years?
More than that.
40? Yeah.
I'm 62.
I was trying to be nice there.
It's like 50 years.
But I mean, think of that. People don't comprehend that anymore. I mean, think of a mechanic that's been a mechanic for 50 years. Like, how rare that is anymore. And those are skills you're starting to see it in the trades. Those are skills that are gone. This is a skill. Not that I'm a doomsday guy at all, but like I said, the pandemic and the riots that happened over a couple of years and what's going on in the world now, and the possibility of World War III, and it's just like, man, there might come a time where you even as us as outdoorsmen, you got to kind of look inward here a little bit and see, hey, what can I do, to help, because if I don't have deer and I need to hunt deer for food, it's a problem, and understand these things. So again, not like I'm a doomsday conspiracy prepper or whatever, but that's the way I kind of look at it, because like I said, over the past couple of years, it's just been a different time.
Yeah. I've been kind of into that a little bit. I've made self bows, I've made guns, I've made from scratch. And my daughter, one time somebody said, if you were going to be on Naked and Afraid, who would you want to be with? And she said, my dad.
Yeah.
And she's later like, oh, that's so nasty. You want to see your dad naked? She said, no, but he's the only guy I know that could survive that stuff.
Yeah. and that's too, like, I don't do it near as much as I would like to, but I'm always outside looking for just practicing, like, oh, that'd be good kindling to start a fire. Or like an old dying, evergreen tree with the needles and stuff. Like, just to kind of keep that kind of stuff in your mind, and that's the thing too. Again, with the skill set as a biologist, I do a lot with vegetation and plant identification, and it's like, there's autumn olive right there. It's an invasive species, but the berries are edible. Like, you could eat that. I could eat that. That's pokeweed. don't eat that. You know,
Well,
like
I ate poke when it's little.
yeah. Well, I'm not
Not when it's big.
I've heard you spend some time on a toilet. You know, if that.
Oh
happens
no,
pretty
not
good.
young poke. It's okay.
Yeah, well, I'll take your word for it. But yeah, I mean, going out there, and when I'm out there with my kids, like we'll find blackberries and raspberries. Like, okay, these you can eat. We'll find, you know, autumn olive. Hey, you can eat this, and this is how, you know, they might not. I know they're not retaining that information, but you know, it's the same thing. I look at it to where, you know, like when I'm fishing. You know, I went down there fishing by myself. Almost always I'm fishing with somebody that is a much better fisherman than me. You know, and I'm like, well, I'm going to go by myself. Normally I don't like to go by myself because who likes to do anything by yourself? You know, but I was out there. I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm starting to get pretty good at this. You know, like I was down there doing things that I've learned from friends that are much, like I said, better fishermen than me. And okay, you know, if I got to fish for food, I'm fairly confident I can catch enough to. Now, if one of my buddies is listening to this, he knows I'm terrible at cleaning fish. You know, I just don't do it enough. I'm bad at it, man. Like, I'm getting better. The past 2 days I've cleaned my fish. I've gotten a lot better, you know. But generally in the past, I just always caught and released. You know, I never really got too much into. But, you know, now anyway, different conversation for a different day. But anyway, Glenn, I appreciate you coming on.
Had a good time. Thank you.
You know, I hope everybody, you know, got something out of this because – you know, when I was thinking about this episode, I was like, you know, it's just from an education standpoint, it's going to be hard to get a whole lot of the details down because it needs to be visual.
Yes.
You know, definitely needs to be visual. But I wanted to introduce people to you, and that way, you know, we put videos out and things like that. You know, content. There's a person behind there's a history there on at least an interview they can listen to and kind of talk about some things. So. That's kind of where I wanted to go with it and just kind of see where we went from there. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. Those of you that are listening, you know, check out on the social medias and stuff like that, and even the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, in the description below, I'll have all the links and stuff for your stuff on there. They can reach out to you and ask questions. Are you? I know you're on Facebook.
Yes.
And I know you're pretty responsive to me. But
I try to be.
You try to be, okay. Well, you know how it is. I mean, some people have a Facebook page, and you know they might not see a message for a week.
I don't go that long.
Yeah.
I'm old and I'm not real good at that, but I shouldn't be more than a day before I get back to you. And hopefully it's better than that. I do have the Wolf Creek Facebook page, but I also my personal Glenn Witchey, and a lot of trappers I'm friends with on there, and,
cool.
And they probably talk with me more on there than the other one. But anyway, to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Right.
Everybody, thanks for checking out the episode and staying with us till the end. We appreciate it. And until next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Yep. Thanks. And that's a wrap on another episode of the HuntScience podcast. I want to thoroughly take this time to thank everybody who has listened or even watched till the end of this episode and had the opportunity to hopefully enjoy the show that we put out for you. It's something that we're really trying to do and take notes and you know, put good quality content for everybody to enjoy. We want to take this moment also to, if you enjoyed the show, check us out over on our social media platforms. Give us a like, give us a follow, check that bell notification, look for the content that we're putting out. Of course, reach out to us, leave comments. Did you like the show? We would love to hear your reviews of the show and any concerns that you have, any updates or any type of feedback to make our content better. We're always open ears for the people that are consuming our show and our content. We want to hear from you. What is it that you want to see? And what is it that you would like us to do? If you want to check us out on any of our social media, first off, you can head over to our website. Go to www.huntsciencepodcast.com. You can check us out on Instagram at HuntScience_podcast, or you can check us out over at our Facebook page at HuntScience Podcast. Any of those is open. Like I said, feel free to comment and all of the above that you do with social media. I just want to take this time again to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for everybody for watching and listening to the content that we're putting out. It means the world to me, and I can't wait for you guys to join us on another episode. Until then, everybody, have a great day, and we'll see you next time.